Hello and welcome to this episode of Rewild My Bio. I'm your host, Sean Slade, and my wild and wonderful guest on this episode is James Alofs. James is a Mandarin, Chinese, and English bilingual actor that has recently returned back to Canada from China. He has over 300,000 followers on Chinese social media, acted in 6 feature films and 11 television series in China. He has also co-hosted a nationally broadcasted talk show in China. He currently lives between Muskoka and Toronto, Ontario, and is producing and writing a historical drama that he will be pitching to networks this year in the US. Chinese social media. You know what? I never really even asked James what that is exactly. But that wasn't what he was here to discuss. He was here today on this episode to share his love for rewilding and conservation from Ontario all the way to China. My guest here today, he is a super well-researched individual on a number of important environmental issues right here in Ontario. And he also, on this episode, fills us in on his experience and knowledge on environmental issues in China and their whole rewilding scene. So, in fact, James' YouTube and Instagram videos, on a whole host of current topics in conservation have become very popular from China to Canada. And we discuss several current environmental issues that he has been sharing on his Instagram, on his TikTok. And I've linked those all in the show notes for today. And that's at rewildmybio.com/rewildontario. So please just head over to the website and share the entire show notes, the website, the whole thing. Just share that with your friends, family, whoever you see fit, especially if you live here in Ontario and want to protect our wildlands and protect and regenerate our soil, water, and air. So links of all sorts are there with tons of great organizations. So I have, nothing left to say really here for this intro. As I've said recently in a solo cast that I'm basically introducing the guest, and that's it. I'm keeping it quiet. I'm going to leave my random ramblings and my rewilding practices and sharing of my research on those solo casts. But yeah, for the most part, I'm just going to do my best to be a better podcast host for all of you listening out there, because I really appreciate your feedback and support and love for the show and all that positive feedback that's helping me become a better podcast host, because it's not really, it's a new gig to me. I may be a lover of nature and the outdoors and whatnot, but when it comes to podcast hosting, that's a whole different ball of wax. So anyways, what else can I say? Check out James on Instagram at James Alofs. Everything again in the show notes. And if you haven't, as always, please comment, rate, and review this podcast on your platform of choice, or, better yet, just head to all the platforms. Just go to them all. Rate and review the podcast, 5 stars. And this helps people. If you enjoy the show, please do this, because this helps people find the show. And that means a lot to me in, this world, because I need you guys' help creating awareness for this show and for these issues that we talk about here. And basically, I need your help because I don't have Twitter anymore. And Twitter's gone. And James was actually trying to lure me over into TikTok. I don't know, trying to keep it light on these social media feeds these days. But anyways, he's a great guy and honestly a kindred soul, or brother from another mother. So it was a great conversation for me anyways, and I hope you guys get a lot of benefit out of it as well. In fact, I want to just commend, his work again on specifically calling out politicians and being a critic, for their lack of nature connection or lack of regard for our laws that protect nature and endangered species. I share his sentiment that wild food is a gateway to nature connection and protecting nature. And we talk a lot about that here today. What else can I tell you really quick about what we chat about? Minister zoning orders. That was one thing I found interesting, which are there in times of crisis. And right now, our Ontario government, Conservative government led by Doug Ford, they're using these to essentially bypass environmental assessments, during COVID of all times. Honestly, there's a lot of touchy subjects here today, but we kept it sunny and we kept it positive and gave you guys plenty of resources. So again, head on over to the website. There's stuff from Environmental Defense Canada. There's a petition there that you can sign to help stop the creation of Highway 413 that runs right through the Greenbelt and, is quite damaging to a lot of wildlife and natural space. So anyways, I've said enough here for this intro. Again, everything is over at the show notes. That's rewildmybio.com/rewildontario. Please do let me know what you think and enjoy the show. Welcome to Rewild My Bio, a self-help and alternative health podcast. I'm your host, Sean Slade. Join me as I share stories, science, and strategies to help you rewild your biology and redefine your biography. Let's kick it off then, just like that. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Sean. Yeah. It's great to be here, man.
It's awesome to have you. And actually, how do I say your last name? How do I...
Alofs.
That's what I would have said. But I didn't want to just go right on the whim and mess it up right at the beginning of the podcast, right? So, well, James Alofs, welcome to the show. It's exciting to have you here because I've really been enjoying a lot of your content online. A lot of your videos around, conservation here in Ontario is great. And then it's been great to get to know you too over social media. It's great when social media has like positive benefits, right? So being able to connect with you has been great, and hearing about another person's journey into rewilding in Ontario, it just means a lot to me. And I really appreciate it. So awesome to have you here. Welcome.
Absolutely, man. Thank you, Sean. Yeah. And it was such a relief to find you as well, my friend. Same sentiment. The whole rewilding movement, there's quite a lot of folks down in the US that seem to be in this. There's a lot of, sort of influencers and content makers down there. But when I came across your Rewild My Bio social media presence, I was like, all right, another Ontarian.
Right?
I'm not here alone. This is great. So great content, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I really do appreciate it. Yeah, and definitely it's mutual. So we'll definitely dive into some of that stuff today. But yeah, before we do that, and in this journey and getting to know each other, I've started to uncover more of your day job, so to speak, and your career as an actor and producer. So yeah, tell me more about that, because we haven't really touched on that too much. But yeah, tell me more about what led you to overseas to China, where your acting career has kicked off. So yeah, tell folks more about what exactly led you over there, and then how you got into acting, and I guess in there how you ended up on kind of like the Chinese version of like The Bachelor. That's kind of, is that correct? I don't know if I'm.
Yep. No, you're right, man.
That's basically
absolutely.
It. Yeah. Right on.
a bit of a weird situation, but yeah, I guess, drama was never my major, but I always did a lot of drama stuff in high school and university. And my undergrad was in geography, human geography, and then I did a master's in business. And I remember my first day, after graduating from my MBA, at my new job, I was working as a brand manager at Procter & Gamble. And I just remember after the first day of initiations, I'm like, there's no way I can be this, corporate slave thing for the rest of my life. So I kind of knew that I had to go try being an actor. I stuck around at P&G for 2 years though, first to kind of learn the ropes. But at the time I decided, instead of going to Los Angeles to be an actor, why not go to China? Because actually one of my minors in undergrad had been in Chinese, and I'd done a number of, summer internships over in China. So that's kind of what made me want to be an actor in China, just because it's such a huge market. Like this year, in 2020, like the box office in China was finally bigger than the box office in North America in terms of, box office receipts. So It's a huge, television and film market. So that's why I went over to China. I had a little bit of, language capabilities as well. But it was hard going at first, man, over in China. It took me about, I'd say 2.5 years to break into the industry over there. And one of the big helpers, to be honest, was going on the Chinese Bachelor show.
Okay, yeah. Tell me more about that. Exactly. What was that about?
It's not exactly acting, and I never, I was always embarrassed of that, when in my career over there, because it's not acting stuff, right? It's like reality TV stuff. But it gave me, some social media followers over there, and I got noticed by some, agents and producers and whatnot. So that really, helped me get my start over there.
Right on.
So I've been doing that basically since 2012 is when I moved over there, and right up to now. And I've been back in Canada, I guess, since kind of for 2019 and 2020. Due, partly to political reasons, it's not safe really to be Canadian over in China right now due to some political tensions.
Mhm.
But also, I wanted to move back to Canada. It was a good excuse for rewilding purposes, to be honest.
Yeah.
Coming across, work like yours, people like, Mika Mortali and Daniel Vitalis and all these folks.
Mhm.
I just felt super disconnected from nature being in China.
Okay.
There's just so many people over there, and the built environment is so enormous. So that's kind of what's brought me back here. I'm still doing, entertainment related work though.
Mhm.
I hosted a Chinese talk show out here in LA
Oh, nice.
that brought me out here for about half a year, and I'm back out here in Los Angeles now, trying to. I'm pitching a television show that I've been working on,
Right on.
sort of for the past year. So I'm still in that, but I'm rewilding as wherever and whenever I can, my friends.
Right.
Fishing, hunting, camping, all that stuff.
For sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen you got your fix in prior to going to LA then, because I've seen some recent snowy videos where you're out there in cold plunging into rivers and things like that. So, right on.
Exactly.
Yeah, but well, yeah. Let's talk about, I guess, your experience over there in China. Yes, lots of people. Canada, we obviously are used to having lots of space. I mean, maybe not so much you and me coming from around the GTA area, I guess, and being more populated and again the built environment. But where exactly were you stationed in there, and what is like nature connection like there? Did you have opportunities? Because even of course in a big city, there's always city parks and things, green space that we can get out to and receive some nature benefits. Because I know you're a guy who's into health and well-being as well. So I mean, yeah, what was it like? Did you find spaces to go hike there, or was there green space?
I say the big problem in China is the air quality, because oftentimes you can go into the countryside outside of the cities, but a lot of times the pollution there will actually be worse. So this is terrible air pollution, like air pollution on some days where you cannot see the building across from you,
Okay.
right? If you're in a high rise.
Hmm.
So the whole idea of like hiking and camping in China, there's a huge knock against that, because like, do I really want to leave the filtered air in my apartment and breathe in this disgusting air out in the countryside, right?
Exactly.
So they are making improvements to the air quality, particularly like in Beijing and Shanghai. I was based mainly in Beijing. The entire sort of entertainment industry is based out of there.
I see.
But I spent a lot of time shooting, because I did primarily television and film work when I was there. I shot projects all throughout the country in all different kinds of areas.
Right.
So there still are some quote unquote wild areas in China,
Mhm.
but there's pretty much people wherever you go.
Mhm.
Like there's a village pretty much every kilometer, right? That's the big difference with Canada, and also in China. The whole idea of the countryside or wilderness
Mhm.
is very negative, because that's where kind of the poor Chinese peasants live.
I see.
So that whole like romantic, oh, I'm going to go into the countryside, it doesn't really exist in China. So it was very hard to have any kind of connection whatsoever
Mm.
to nature in China. Now
Right.
that is changing. Maybe we can talk about that later on. But they're setting up national parks in China, and
Mhm.
camping and hiking is really evolving as emerging as a significant pastime there now, just over
Mhm.
the past few years.
Right.
But it was
Right.
hard, man. It was hard to maintain
Yeah.
any semblance of nature connection
You,
whatsoever.
you must have brought it with you, because I have seen in looking at some of the research on nature connection that I'm doing, looking at different studies coming out of China specifically. Of course, forest therapy has been huge in Japan for some time, but actually specifically, yeah, look, there seems to be a call to the wild there in China, and that's what I was going to ask you. And maybe we can touch on that now. Is, yeah, what sort of is there public lands? Like, it's kind of a naive question on my part, but like here we are in Ontario, where we're 80+%, public crown lands. And I'm just curious, what exactly is it like there? Is there national parks? You're saying it's becoming more accessible, but are folks actually demanding it and rewilding out in China?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the entire country of China is technically public land, but not in the sense that you and I know it, because
Okay.
the Communist Party owns all the land, right? The
Okay.
Communist Party is the only landowner in all of
Mm.
China. So
The plot
if you
thickens.
if you quote unquote own property, you're leasing property from the Communist Party for like 99 years.
I see.
You don't actually own it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, the public land that we know here in North America or Crown land in Canada, the only thing they have that's similar, like they have forest reserves, regional forest reserves that again are open to resource extraction if industry wants to use them. The most, I guess, similar thing would be they are setting up a national park system over there. And one of them is in like the headwaters of the Yangtze River up
Hmm.
in the mountains of kind of like the Qinghai Tibet area. I believe it's called like the Three River National Park. And another national park, which is actually bigger than Yellowstone, is kind of up near the North Korean and Russian border. And that park is being set up specifically for the Siberian tiger, which there are probably around, I believe the number is around 400 to 500 in Russia, and there's probably 50 of them in China, and maybe another 50 in North Korea. So
Okay.
that's a pretty cool place that people can visit. But they're definitely
Right.
trying to. They've had political exchanges with the United States, specifically around the whole thing about how do you set up and manage national parks.
Right.
So this
That's
this is a
fascinating.
really it's
Wow.
a
Yeah.
great thing. It's a great thing for rewilding, getting people connected to nature for sure.
Right.
Now the danger in China is the existing kind of provincial parks and stuff they do have there. What happens is like local governments tend to try to turn them into an economic engine where there's paved walking paths, they put in like roller coasters, and
Right.
they do all this ridiculous stuff that's not really wild.
Ah.
So there's a real kind of struggle going on right now where the central government is trying to keep it pure
Hmm.
and make sure that the local governments don't destroy the notion of what a national park really is.
Right. Yeah.
But it's definitely
That's
a step in
fascinating.
the right direction.
Oh, that's fascinating, especially because yeah, access to nature or the way different cultures, utilize nature. It's not always the same as us, where maybe it might be, at least the way you and I commune with nature is a little more reciprocal, kind of a give and take relationship, respecting it, conserving it, and yeah, I guess there's a whole host of different things that are gonna kind of pop up as they go through that. What about like so? What about well, what I'm thinking is, I'm wondering if there's any movement within like within China that say people are into like bushcraft camping or rewilding. I know you've got quite a social media following on your Chinese social media accounts. So like, what are you sharing your videos over there as well, or is there bushcraft videos going on out in these woods? Or yeah,
Yeah, I'm definitely sharing some of the camping and bushcraft stuff over there because
oh you are.
as I said, the it's definitely a rapidly emerging, like, new trends in China seem to arise very rapidly, through the internet, things that
Hmm.
they were not present at all only 5 years ago. With the internet, they can explode on the scene very suddenly. So hiking, camping is definitely growing very rapidly. So it's the weird thing with China is this: if say in Canada, say 20% of people go hiking and camping, right, on a semi-regular basis. In China, it might only be 2%,
Right.
but because there's 1.4 billion people there, there's still a huge absolute number of people
Mm,
who are doing this, right?
makes sense.
So it's at a much lower percentage level than in a place like Canada, the United States. But there's just a huge absolute number of people that are still doing it.
Right.
So to give you kind of a barometer, like Colombia and North Face have been there for a while. I would say probably 5 to 10 years. But Patagonia just got into the market, I believe, about 12 months ago.
Hmm.
So of the big sort of outdoor equipment brands or apparel brands, it's definitely not a mature market. But in terms of rewilding specifically, there is a story I just saw about a group of young people from Beijing and Shanghai who have set up this kind of rewilding commune in the hills of I believe it's Hubei province, which is kind of in central China.
Okay.
It's very hot during the summertime. Like, it would rarely snow in the wintertime. Um, like they a lot of it's kind of maybe similar to maybe Virginia kind of climate
Okay.
over there, but they've set it up. And from the article that I saw, it's basically youths who are disenfranchised with the sort of post-industrial meaningless of big city
Mm,
life and the whole working overtime at these big corporations and just wanting to get back to this simple but rewarding
right.
natural life. So it's fascinating to see that there's already this kind of thing popping up there.
Yeah, wow, that is amazing, especially because, well, I guess I can share your sentiment in having a business degree and then kind of foot in the door in all sorts of different business projects, but then always that kind of call to rewilding, right? To get back to the wild, and it, like you say, it's physical labor. It's it's you're braving the elements, but at the same time, it's super rewarding, right? So, it's just neat to see that with that growth of like industrialization that's happened in China, there's with that comes this kind of push or this call, I guess, to the wild. So it's fascinating that you've been able to kind of experience that or see that, I guess, yourself. What I wanted to ask you about pollution. Like, so yeah, pollution city bad, but when you're all over the country in different remote areas, have you been into different forests and mountain ranges and that air quality gets better and it's quite beautiful, beautiful nature. That I'm assuming if Siberian tigers that is are supposed to be wandering around, right? So what's that like though when you get out there?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are some clean areas. I shot a TV show for 4 months out in this province called Guizhou, which is way out in the west. Kind of like I would say it's very mountainous. The air quality was very good there.
Yeah.
It was extremely rural, very poor sort of agricultural soil, but there was still tons of people there, as there is in all of China. But it's weird because in an effort to clean up the air in the cities, what they've done is they pushed a lot of the coal fired power plants out into the countryside, right? So it's not polluting the city air anymore.
Oh, I
Because
see.
in the city, you also have the problem with all the tailpipe exhaust from all these vehicles.
Right.
Because Shanghai and Beijing are cities of 20 million plus people, so there's just a huge amount of air pollution coming from vehicles alone. So they are rapidly shifting. Like I think China last year spent more on renewable energy installation than the European Union and the United States combined.
Hmm.
So they are making a rapid push into that, but there's still, a huge part of the grid is still powered by coal. Um, so
I
it is a
see.
problem. The air quality is getting better rapidly in Beijing and Shanghai, but it's still quite a bit of a problem in a lot of the countryside, man.
Wow.
But yes, there are populations of Siberian tigers. There is a population of also, it's called the Amur leopard, which is like endemic, I guess, to southern Russia and then central and northern China. There's about 60 of those big cats left, and their range is actually expanding. Their numbers are going up. The central government is doing a concerted effort to try to maintain connectivity of their habitat. So that whole kind of, connectivity of landscapes is something that's emerging there as well, right?
Awesome.
Like as it is in North America. So there are definitely some promising signs. There's definitely stuff worth saving in China. It's not
Yeah.
completely gone.
Hmm.
It's just being pushed to the margins much more so than in a place like North America.
Right. Well, it's landmass, it's a giant country, right? So I mean, yeah, definitely. There's lots of places out there to rewild, and that's the amazing thing about nature, right? Um, take care of it and let it regenerate itself, right? And good things will come from that for sure. So hopefully this demand and this push keeps going. But let's do the segue now into bringing you back home to Ontario and everything. I guess what you said, it was kind of that call for nature connection yourself that came back. I mean, there's other reasons, but when you came back, what kind of made you decide to go and do this project that you're working on right now? In fact, maybe let's talk about that project, and yeah, and then we can get into some rewilding practices and different conservation stuff going on. But what?
Totally.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, what
Well, I
exactly
guess
is that project about?
Well, I guess maybe just firstly, like this specific thing that happened to me in China was like I was a co-host on this nationally broadcast talk show, and there was an episode on the environment, and I kind of had to lead the charge of the other co-hosts on that because the producers knew that I was sort of an outdoorsy guy. But doing all the research for that, I read a book called The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert. I don't know if you're familiar with that book,
Familiar?
but
Don't know though. What? Can
got
you
it. It's
say more a
definitely
bit? Yeah.
it's fascinating, man. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 2015. A lot of the data probably is not necessarily so up to date anymore, but it just blew my mind about the scope of plastic pollution and biodiversity loss, and also like the real impacts of climate change. So that really scared me, and also made me this urge to rewild and reconnect to nature was quadrupled after that.
Mm.
But yeah, after getting back to Canada, man, honestly, I just spent 6 months where I just disconnected myself from everything, and I just spent a ton of time out in the bush,
Mm.
just sort of
Right.
reconnecting and kind of trying to unwind from all my time in China. So that was phenomenal. I got my gun license, which I'd never had. I got my hunting license.
Ah.
I got my fishing license again, and just got out there and had a phenomenal time. And that's kind of when I started coming up with ideas about how can I combine my passion for rewilding with my profession of kind of acting and television and film. So that's when I started looking for what stories could I tell that have a big part of kind of rewilding as the theme to the show.
Mm.
So the television show that I'm developing is called Thor's Angels, and I don't want to get too much into it, but it takes place basically around the year 400 AD. It's dealing with the Romans and the Huns and the Celtic tribes and the German tribes, and I just will say that rewilding and the
Mm,
power of nature connection is definitely a major theme in the story.
right, right.
So that's what I'm out here, and
That's awesome.
it's taken me much more than a year to sort of complete the work to a point where it's ready to start pitching,
Mm,
which is why I'm out here in Los Angeles to start
awesome.
that process. So I'm pretty excited about it, man.
That's awesome. And looking at some of those cultures you're mentioning, and yeah, rewilding. It wasn't a lifestyle choice, I guess, for those folks, right? It was very much part of their everyday, right? Constantly in commune with the elements, and yeah, just thinking about some of those like tribes that you mentioned. That's it's just very much a way of life, right? So,
Oh yeah, man. And what's interesting is that the original Rewilder. So this is a guy named Ammianus Marcellinus. There's a bunch of Roman historians at that time who, at the peak of the Roman Empire, they were so technologically advanced, right? They had
mhm,
central heating, they had centrally heated floors, they had so much technology, and there was so much wealth that for a lot of these historians, what they were lamenting was they looked at some of these, particularly the German tribes, and they said, wow, they're so like, muscular and fit and ferocious people because they live in this sort of very hostile and wild environment, right? And
mhm,
it's like the environment creates the people. And they were lamenting the fact that Romans are becoming fat and lazy and basically corrupted by civilization and technology, right?
mm,
So that theme, I think, is very similar to the theme that we're dealing with in the post-industrial world with a lot of the rewilding stuff. So when I was reading some of these, these historians writing back, in 300 AD and 10 AD, I'm like, wow, these guys are like the original rewilders. It
wow.
obviously wasn't called it back then, but they were all like, we need to get the Roman youth need to be living like this at
Mm,
some point in their youth to rekindle that kind of ferocity and passion and
right,
and hardness
right.
that they were starting to lose because of the corrupting nature of technology
Hmm.
and civilization. So
Oh man,
it's
it's great.
it's very interesting, man.
Yeah, definitely something. It seems like that the rites of passage is and using nature as rites of passages, whether it be a backcountry camping trip or just doing some cold plunge therapy, just to say that you can do it, right. But it's these little things that we can do now, and I think it's so important. So it's pretty. I'm really excited to see that come out and see everything that develops with that for sure, without a doubt. One thing I wanted to say about your story, I love that. Yeah, here you are over Canadian, over in China, but you come back and you go deep into the woods, and you got your gun license. You said, and I think it's amazing that the restorative aspects of nature allow for creativity and doors to open. So I'm just really excited to see what comes of all this your project right now. But yeah, tell me about your you say gun license. So what was the purpose of said gun licenses? Hunting has that been a part of your rewilding practice? What's that been like for you since coming back?
Absolutely, man. It was just a way, when I was over in China, I had been a vegan. I bought into that whole, I think, lifestyle, particularly after seeing the film Cowspiracy,
Okay.
which does actually have a lot of misleading facts in it in hindsight. But at the time, I was like, this is the best thing I can do for the environment. One thing I definitely
Mm,
found on a vegan diet, other than, my health going downhill, was that it just made me feel more disconnected from nature, I found. And when I got back to Ontario, switching back to kind of a paleo diet for health reasons, I was also like, disenfranchised with the industrial agriculture system. And the idea of, I'd always been a fisherman my entire life. I'm like, why not get into hunting? It's the same, it's regulated just as sustainably,
mhm,
in a country like Canada, the United States. Why not get out there? There's more of a learning curve, I would say, to hunting.
mhm.
But I was like, I absolutely have to make this part of my lifestyle because it's just an amazing way to get wild food and to be connected to your local landscape, right?
Right. Yeah,
To really
definitely.
feel a part. Because one of the big things with veganism, I don't know if you've ever experimented with that, but it's kind of like the whole, leave only footsteps, take only pictures kind
Mhm.
of, mentality. Like the environmentalism versus conservation
Right.
kind of split that we talked about before. And I definitely feel the conservation split or philosophy is definitely more engaging because it directly connects you to your landscape. But to
Right.
answer your question, the first season, the first year that I got my license, I went out during the turkey season for about a week. I was not successful, but had the time of my life, man. Like being out in the
Right.
woods. I don't know if you find this, but being out in the woods with a firearm
Right.
in full camo with this purpose,
Hmm.
it just it's an entirely different feeling. It's religious. I think only like religious terminology can really explain it,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's a completely different feeling than if you're just going through the woods on a hike,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I recently just read a paper, actually it was a book I just finished, The Nature Principle by Richard Louv, so same individual who had wrote Last Child in the Woods. And essentially, a lot of talk, a lot of readings and writings about nature connection seem to leave hunting out, where, as I think, because a lot of people might seem it as different from an extraction standpoint. But as far as nature connection goes, it's very similar to appreciative practices where one might be, mindful of, say, the beauty of nature, or being grateful for a lovely landscape or something like that, right? But yeah, so the fact that you're saying like how you actually felt that difference in you, like, I mean, I would agree, just from being out in the woods and hunting turkeys, and when you're quiet and you're trying to get close to a bird that's quite, like, instinct tells it to be weary of everything that moves, like, yeah, being out there for a week and not getting one sounds familiar. It sounds familiar, actually. But yeah, no, there is something different about it. So yeah, I appreciate you saying
Oh,
that for sure.
yeah, totally, man. It was absolutely amazing, and I really do think, in terms of reconnecting people who have grown up in urban environments into nature, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is humanity's disconnection from nature, because humans tend to protect the things that we love, and if
Hmm.
huge percentage of human population no longer has a connection to nature, that's very dangerous, because we won't necessarily elect political leaders that are going to protect nature in the way that we need it to. So I really see like food as the gateway drug to nature
Mm.
connection.
Well
And
said.
that's why, I think fishing and hunting, everybody loves food. It's, like food, water, and sex. That's what every human is like programmed to desire.
Exactly.
So
Right.
to there's nothing I think more, in the whole sort of hipster movement of, gluten-free tacos and baking your own sourdough bread, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You can't get more balls deep into the food movement than
Yeah.
harvesting or like hunting and gathering
Hunting gather.
yourself.
Yeah. Right.
So getting people out into the woods via that method of with an objective of food collection, I
Hmm.
think is a very powerful and under utilized strategy for looking
Yeah.
at connecting people to nature, man.
Well said. And I do think there's a almost like there's a market out there, if you will. If you think, not to say to profit from said market, but there's a community of individuals out there who are ex-vegans looking to incorporate meat, maybe for whatever reasons, but they're not looking, like you said, not looking to the big ag and the conventional food system. They're looking to go procure it themselves. And yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about a vegan lifestyle or vegan diet, is that you're able to gain skills in making food that doesn't involve meat, because when it actually comes down to it, trying to rely off just wild meat for your diet, if you want to eat a lot of meat, it's a tough go, right? So, and that's in a lovely place like Ontario, where we have opportunity and lands managed to hunt and conserve lots of animals. So, for sure,
Absolutely.
without a doubt. Well, let's do this, because you had mentioned voting governments in, and yeah, I've just taken a browse at your Instagram, seeing all the awesome videos on different conservation things that you're calling attention to, and calling out, in this day and age. And I think that's so important, because it's interesting times politically, and it takes courage, right, to sometimes stand up and advocate for the voiceless, essentially. And I think doing the type of environmentalism or conservation that you do, I think is very noble. So I mean, well, I guess before we kind of get into your, some of these specific issues, is environmentalism or conservationism, is that something that you've was that always there, or was it the nature connection and the love for nature? Like, what was your whole life story like? Were you always a conservationist, or like you said, you had been fishing for a while, but yeah, what kind of came first for you?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I think there was always a connection there, primarily because of fishing, to be honest.
Mm.
Both my mother and my father were fishermen, and spending all this time in nature fishing, when you see where your food comes from, and the notion that if that lake or place gets polluted, your
Mm.
food's polluted, therefore you are polluted, that really closes the loop on a on a very personal level.
Right.
So I think it all stems from that, man, to be honest. And that goes back to the power of food as a gateway to nature connection.
For sure.
I think it all stems from that, man. Family vacations in Florida during the winter time, fishing down there all the time off the beach. And then, summers in central Ontario at our family cottage, just fishing like for, 3 months straight as a kid. That's what it is.
It's the antidote, right? Get kids out there fishing, get them connecting. I think when you're a young kid and you catch your first fish, it's like something instinctual, like you said, right? Where it's just like, wow, there's this deep connection. You're going to remember that day, forever, right? So it might just very well be the antidote. Get folks out in nature. Then, like you said, from there, they're protecting the things that they love, right? So it's awesome.
Exactly. And I saw a hilarious t-shirt this one old timer guy was wearing down in Florida once. And it said something like, have your teenagers fish, teach your teenagers to fish so they won't be out doing drugs or something like that, right? Because if you have a teenager who's into fishing, they're not going to be out doing drugs. And that's true for me, man. When I was a teen, I was more interested in fishing than doing drugs. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But
that's good stuff. It definitely sets like the precedent, I think, just for that love and the connection and just wanting to protect it and be in it, right? So that's awesome.
Totally.
So let's talk about that. Some things that allow us to be in it. It's interesting because again, a naive question from me asking about, public land in China. I mean, we're lucky over here that we have laws and things that protect our nature. Of course, that is something that's in China, I'm sure as well. But over here we have different, government agencies and things protecting things. And it's kind of interesting in this time to see things start to get axed, especially under the current Ontario government. So I critical of the current government for a lot of the videos that I've seen you posting. And otherwise, if it wasn't for that, I really wouldn't have had caught wind on that. So, I mean, tell folks how maybe you started to, or where exactly you're doing your research, or how are you kind of coming across these things? Is there any resources you want to share with Ontarians and anybody else for that matter that's interested?
Definitely. I mean, if you're concerned about the environment in Ontario, whether you're a conservationist, right, like you're an outdoors person, or you're an environmentalist, kind of the take only pictures, leave only footsteps kind of crowd, I would definitely follow, Ontario Nature and Environmental Defense, those two organizations. They have a lot of information. They're very politically focused organizations. Like, I would say probably the best organization for conservation in Canada would be the Nature Conservancy in terms of their overall impact, but they're apolitical, right? All they do is conserve land. Right. And they actually get $20 million a year from the federal government. They get a few mil from each of the provincial governments every year for their operating budget. But they're out there, conserving like $100 million worth of land every year. They're the biggest environmental organization in Canada. But again, when it comes to political stuff, they don't enter into that fray strategically. So if you want information on, what are the big issues and how you can take action, it would definitely be Environmental Defense and Ontario Nature. I would also say that, the only magazine I subscribe to is the Toronto Star, because they actually do have a few kind of like beat reporters that are focused specifically on these environmental issues. So I get a lot of good stuff from the Toronto Star as well.
I see. Okay, so what you said, OntarioNature.org is the one, and then yours, and then the other one was yours2protect.ca. Is that?
Yeah, OntarioNature.org, and then I think Environmental Defense website is like envirodefense.ca.
Right.
Their Instagram accounts are also fantastic. They put all their stuff in there. I would recommend following them. Yours2protect.ca is interesting because it's made by Ontario Nature, Enviro Defense, Eco Justice, a number of these organizations, and it's essentially a map, and it has all these hot spots. And you can find, you'll be surprised. There might be something going on in your neighborhood that you had no idea was going on. And there's action items. And a lot of these action items now under the current government have to do with these things called minister's zoning orders, which are technically supposed to be emergency actions taken by the government in a situation of a crisis, essentially. But what they're using this power to do is to basically ram through development projects without doing environmental assessments or doing any kind of local consultation with local town councils, or even getting around the protections of the Ontario Greenbelt, which protects a huge swath of the area around the Greater Toronto Area. So a lot of these problems right now are around these problems with the MZOs coming up from the current government.
Okay. It's interesting too, because I'm thinking of like things when it comes to building a house or cabin, there's all these continued regulations and things like that. And obviously environmental assessments, which are important to make, depending on where one is building, especially. So I'm just thinking of myself looking at building, a cabin up on 28 acres of the Canadian Shield. Obviously, you want to make sure your impact is light, and I'm obviously cognizant of that. But I'm just thinking of all the regulations and red tape that we civilians have to go through. But then here is the government kind of just in these times, right? It's just it's just kind of par for the course, it seems, these days. But here they are just kind of doing what they want to do and using these types of so an MZO, kind of like an executive order type thing, essentially, is what I'm getting out of it. Is that essentially it? Or
Exactly.
wow,
Exactly.
wow.
And it's even more potentially more further reaching than an executive order, because these are things that really should only be used during the time of a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the Premier Ford has used, I think, about 40 of these MZOs in the past 12 months, but in the past 10 years, I think there was only about 30 of them used. So he's really ramped them up. And especially during the time of, COVID, when all the news is focused on that, he's trying to, I think, bang through a lot of these things. He's a very, anti-environment. You can tell that our premier is very disconnected from nature himself personally. It's really unfortunate. And another big thing, I think there's this notion in Ontario that because there is so much crown land in the north of the province, that we should basically be able to run roughshod over southern Ontario. But it's very dangerous idea, because first of all, any community, you need to have healthy functioning ecosystems for clean water and clean food production, right? Also for green space for residents. And then there's also the whole fact that southern Ontario is the most ecologically important and productive land in the entire province. So the kind of species that are around, for example, from where you are, right, in the greater sort of Windsor area around that north coast of Lake Erie, that's hardcore Carolinian forest. And there's a very small amount of Carolinian forest in all of Canada. It's basically just that, basically from Windsor to Toronto. And that's the most biologically diverse and biologically productive land in the entire province. So the before human settlement or before European settlement, the highest numbers of large mammals, per square acre, per acre or per hectare or whatever, would absolutely be, where you are right now, where Toronto is right now. So it's really important for, because so many of these also species now are threatened or endangered, that we do maintain, healthy functioning ecosystems in southern Ontario, and not just let them get all paved over and destroyed and fragmented, because there's so many unique species found there and nowhere else in the province and the country. So it's just, I think it's a fallacy. North of Lake Superior is basically half the province, but the land up there is so ecologically, poor, I would say. Not bad, but it's just so unproductive, right? In terms of the amount of biomass per acre, per hectare. So the value of an acre of land in southern Ontario to the environment is much higher than the value of an acre of land in, Moose Factory, Ontario.
Interesting. Yeah, right. And that's scary too, because all this land down here, obviously productive. So then, of course, we're farming it, right? And plowing over and just kind of killing the soil. So, I mean, like you say, me growing up just outside of Windsor and, southern Ontario, as far as you can go. And kind of that whole area down there is just very deserted and flat. Now, in recent 10 years or so, sure, a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of species, a lot of animals in this area, they are coming back, but at the same time, that's from long-term efforts of conservation going on in Ontario. So we'd hate to see, things just get plowed over, and it is that kind of reductionist mindset or local mindset that I could see how, kind of Doug Ford has that, not realizing that, rivers are flowing from all the way from northern Ontario all the way down through. So we can't just pave over all of this and let that go, everything will be fine. It's like a little ball of cancer just waiting to kind of expand and grow right into that stuff, or so I'm just I'm very cognizant of the fact that we're just constantly plowing over this stuff, and it's not good.
Exactly, man. And just the farmland, many people don't realize the Greenbelt was really created by Premier Mike Harris, who was also conservative premier back in the 1990s, because he realized that areas of the Greenbelt and other areas in southern Ontario that it protects, that's the headwater for so many different rivers that we rely on for our drinking water, right? Because the water in these areas, a lot of it's the Oak Ridges Moraine, which is, all these fine sand sort of deposited by the glaciers as they were retreating 10,000 years ago, but giant aquifers underneath there. It's really important to leave those areas for the health of also the Great Lakes, right? Because so many rivers that drain into Lake Erie, into Lake Ontario, even to Lake Huron will have their headwaters there, also Lake Simcoe. And then just for the production of food, because it's the best farmland. I mean, many people don't realize it from Toronto. If you're from Toronto, or Windsor or another big city, that the only arable land in Ontario is essentially south of Lake Simcoe. And then the other 90% of the province to the north, that's Canadian Shield and Boreal Forest and all that, some mixed kind of eco zones, but none of that's really arable. Yeah. So it's really important that you do protect that for sure, man.
Yeah, without doubt. And I had seen, now I guess I wanted to get a few links and share some petitions or anything, because I know you've been sharing some. So I don't know if there's any current or ones are old, but I know there was that 400 highway series that was looking to go through the green belt there, and it was I forget 40 something or other. But anyways, I don't know if you could say more about that one for folks.
Definitely, man. Yeah. So I actually just got an email today from Environmental Defense because they wanted me to do a video on that. Because the first video I did for them on TikTok, it got their petition about 8,000 signatures in 24 hours. So nice. That's the power of TikTok, man. I hope you start sharing some of your content on TikTok, because really? the organic reach there is just unbelievable compared to Instagram. But anyways. And there's almost nobody. There's nobody like in the hunting or I would say outdoors in general. Definitely, like there's only I think 2 people in the bushcraft space that I've been able to find on there. But there's a real dearth of creators in this space. Your and I spaces. But anyways, yeah, the Highway 413, which is essentially going to be going from around King, looping around Brampton, and then connecting down to the 401. It is a concept. I think it's going to cost somewhere between $6 and $10 billion. And it was rejected under the last 2 governments because it was shown by third-party engineering analysis it only saved commuters about 30 to 60 seconds of time. So it doesn't make any sense. But Doug Ford's very pro-development, and if it could make $6 to $10 billion for his development and construction buddies, he's all over that. Because all the environmental and other financial repercussions be damned, but it would be going over something like 85 main river and tributary arms of different rivers that flow through that area, like the headwaters of the Humber and the Credit and a number of other rivers. It would be really disastrous. It would also pave over, I think, about 4,000 acres of prime farmland. So Environmental Defense and Ontario Nature were running petitions against this project, but what they've decided to do with a new petition is they're trying to get the federal government to come in and require an environmental assessment, because one of the laws that Doug Ford has recently changed is that basically if they want to, they can kind of jam through things without environmental assessments, which should be illegal. It actually is illegal under the Environmental Bill of Rights of Ontario. Really? So what they've changed their strategy, and now they're going to call on the Minister of the Environment, I believe it's Wilkinson, in the federal government, to come in, because rivers, if they're navigable by boat, they're technically under the jurisdiction of the federal government. And also, if there's any threatened or endangered fish species in any of these rivers, which there are, right, multiple ones, and it technically is under the purvey of the federal government. So they're trying to draw the federal government's attention to this. And if they require an environmental assessment for this project, it'll probably take 4 or 5 years before that's complete, and Doug Ford will probably be dead of a heart attack because he's morbidly obese by then. So that should be out of the danger zone. But
yeah, no, well, that's just it. The way this goes, who knows? Hopefully somebody comes in and has more concern over the environment. It's going to be interesting come election time, indeed, in Ontario, because there's just a whole lot of things just not making sense. I'm just thinking specifically, I'm beating around here, but yeah, like small businesses being closed, by a conservative government, right? It's interesting. And then of course with that comes all these, destruction of environmental lands and important areas and whatnot. So honestly, I couldn't see things going well. So I don't think whether the heart attack gets them or not, I just don't see it having a long future. So let's hope that things like that actually go through. So is there a petition then with that, or no? They're actually going to the federal government?
There's a brand new petition, so they've already sent a letter to the minister. But yeah, if your followers could sign that petition on the environmental defense, I think it's envirodefense.ca. Okay, that petition's up right now, and it's to call the federal government to come in and basically require them to follow the law and do an environmental review for the project, which would delay it by 5 years. And by that time, Doug Ford's probably out of office,
Yeah.
or deceased.
And
So that's
I
that's
shouldn't be.
probably a good thing.
Sounds like I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing about that, but I kind of right now I don't know where I'm looking for. I'm not looking for leadership in current leaders, at least in the government. That's for sure. So that's why I think it takes shows like this, and I've actually been getting a lot of good feedback lately, and having people like you on who aren't afraid right now to voice or be critical of these people, these elected officials who work for us. So again, wishing no ill harm on anybody. Obviously, we're not, but I'm just saying, yeah, nature is medicine. That's all. We'll leave it at there. If hopefully Doug Ford gets his dose, indeed, we want to see him do that. So, because like you said, with connection to nature or contact with nature comes the love for nature, and then hopefully wants to protect it. So yeah, that, or we just get him out in the woods with a big dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and that normally, I think if all political leaders just did a big dose of psilocybin mushrooms, a big hero dose in the woods right now, that would solve a lot of problems. But that's
absolutely, man.
But
100%.
That's my opinion. But anyways, yeah, one other thing is the species at risk stuff. Because I had having caribou here in Ontario, talking about hunting earlier, going hunting caribou where they're actually doing quite well out west has always been a thing for me. Anyways, I've always wanted to do that.
Totally.
But here in Ontario, we do have caribou species, the Boreal Caribou, and I know there's protectcaribou.ca. That's a really neat initiative to check out for sure. But have you looked into that specifically? Because I know you did a post on that, and I just didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to maybe bring up, or what you've learned about that.
Definitely. Well, yeah, like there's the definite important distinction. Like you said, there's the tundra caribou or the Arctic caribou. I think there's multiple names, for that half the caribou population. And then there's the woodland caribou,
right?
Or sometimes I guess some people call it the mountain caribou. But the woodland caribou is really the one that's in under threat. It's threatened officially under the SARA Act, which is the Canadian Endangered Species Act. And it's pretty much in trouble, in Alberta, in BC, in Ontario. I think it might be doing slightly better in Quebec. But it's one of those species that actually does not do well with commercial logging. That's the main threat to what's going on with that species, because they really need old growth forest, right? And a lot of times for the logging industry, there's this weird, there's a very weird notion out there where I think some of the hardcore environmentalists believe that logging of any kind is terrible, right? You should never cut down a tree, which I think is untrue, right? And then because logging can be very sustainably done, it's a great source. It's much better than using plastic, right, stuff or petroleum-based things. And then on the same side of the scale, there's people that are, I think, in industry and sort of like definitely something that's circulating among, I don't know, maybe the far right or certain conservative circles, that any kind of logging is sustainable. But like most things, right, the truth is somewhere, it's more nuanced than that. It's sort of gray instead of black and white.
For sure.
So with the mountain caribou, logging in old growth forests, trees that are 300-400 years old, that's the only kind of habitat that woodland caribou can live in, because they eat, specific species of lichen that live on those trees. And in second and third growth trees that are maybe 50 or 100 years old, they just can't live in those areas. So the logging industry of these very, economically profitable old growth forests, it's really terrible for the woodland caribou. And that's why they're experiencing declines, all across the country, including here in Ontario. Right. But one of the bad things that just happened under Doug Ford is that he exempted the logging industry indefinitely from all protections of the Ontario Endangered Species Act. So that means that they don't have to basically consider the woodland caribou when they're going around logging. So it's a really bad sign for the already threatened woodland caribou in Ontario. And like you mentioned, I guess tundra, plains, Arctic caribou, whatever you want to call them, those big, mobile herds that live, north of the tree line in many situations in tundra areas, their populations are still very robust, and they're hunted quite heavily, actually,
Right.
and
Yeah.
sustainably by both
Sustainably. Yeah.
indigenous and non-indigenous quotas. So
Indeed.
it's a tale of two cities, really, on those two caribou populations.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the kind of paradox it's always there in nature, right? So logging, not necessarily small scale, like ecological forestry, can be a great thing for forest health, right? Whereas mass, huge scale, again, I guess the way in which we're going about it, right, is the important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, also focusing logging on second and third growth, like areas that have already been logged, 50 years ago, relogging that as opposed to logging virgin, especially old growth forests, just because it takes so long to regenerate, staying away from that because that's the critical habitat. And it's funny, there's many other species, right,
Hmm.
that actually do better. Like moose is a great example with
Right.
the much smaller clear cuts now that are done in the logging industry. It's
Hmm.
very beneficial for them because that kind of what is it called, that edge habitat, right, also
Hmm.
for most members of the deer family,
Right.
where you have wood and then open areas. It's amazing for food sources and them, just their mobility and everything. So
Yeah.
it's a nuanced situation for sure. One crazy thing to
Hmm.
remember is that in North America, like 10,000 or 11,000 years ago, there were still three species of elephant in North America. There's a great book called The Eternal Frontier, which is about the paleoecology of North America, right? And it talks about all the different kinds of species over time that the continent has seen. And there was the mastodon, which was the biggest elephant. Sorry, there was the woolly mammoth, there was the mastodon, and there was one other elephant species. The mastodon essentially was in the temperate forests, like what most of Ontario is today. The woolly mammoth was further north, but like elephants that are left in Asia and Africa, what they do is they go through the forest and they're knocking down trees. They're eating entire branches off trees.
Hmm.
They're like giant bulldozers. And when you get a herd of these things going through, they'd almost act like a little like clear cut mini forestry
Right.
operation themselves. And now that we don't have these animals on the landscape, it's not natural to have no disturbance of forests for very long periods of time at all.
Right.
So that's another reason it's actually natural to have these forest disturbances, right?
That's amazing.
So that's another reason why, like no logging at all is also not the answer, because it's taking away this kind of improvement to wildlife habitat.
Right. Yeah. The edge, like you say, the edge habitat is so important. What was that book that you mentioned? I'll put that in the show notes.
It's I believe it's by Tim Flannery. It's called The Eternal Frontier. It blew my mind, that book, man. Absolutely
Cool.
blew my mind.
Eternal Frontier. Yeah, no, I'll definitely put that in the show notes and let folks take a look at it. Yeah, because I mean that's just it. It's amazing to see how nature itself is just this synergistic. We look at things like, say, a forest fire, or a bunch of trees getting run over by elephants as a bad thing for, yeah, sure, if you're the tree, getting burnt down or getting run over. But as far as trees in general and the health of the forest, we're seeing it's that whole thing in nature. It's you need death to have life, right? And it's just an important part of it.
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Flannery, like they don't really know, like the Pleistocene extinctions, right? There's some paleoecologists that believe it was more climate change. There's some believe that it was more human predation, right? For the first time, you had humans predating on these big species that had very low fertility rates, and they weren't able, because like when you have human hunters who can run an entire herd of mastodons off a cliff, right?
Hmm.
They're not used to mortality at that level. So there's Tim Flannery is definitely at a camp that it was like more 80% human predation and 20% climate change
Hmm. Hmm.
that was the cause of the Pleistocene extinction. So if that human predation was not there, because these animals, unlike the big megafauna in Eurasia and Africa that had been used to human predation for a very long period of time, they had essentially evolved beside each other. It was a completely new phenomenon in North America, and we would still have like the American lion,
Right.
and maybe the definitely the three species of elephant, and some of these bigger animals would still be there.
Hmm.
So it's very much kind of a missing part of the puzzle in North America. So it's kind of interesting.
Without a doubt. Now, here's a question for you: would you still be doing your backcountry bushcraft camping if there was elephants roaming, or big tigers roaming the street?
Absolutely not, man.
Well, we're talking about cultures, right? Yeah, of course. If a Siberian tiger is going to be rolling through camp, I don't know if they make tiger spray. I know bear spray is a thing because I've used it, but but right, like what's geez. That's
Oh,
for sure.
totally. I mean, if they had dire wolves and if they had
Right.
short-faced bears, which I think the short-faced bear was like double the size of a grizzly and it could run faster or something like
Oh
that, man, I wouldn't be there. I mean, there's still a lot of people who it's definitely more dangerous going camping in the western half of the continent
man.
where the brown bear is, right?
Yeah.
But it would be freaky, man, to have
Oh
those
yeah.
animals out there. But you know what? Having the predators, even like the black bear and the wolf in
Hmm.
Ontario, that's what the magic is.
Yeah.
These magical forest predators. I mean, it's dangerous, but that's what makes it magical. Is you have the whole duality, right,
Right.
of existence there, where it's dangerous but also wonderful. And
Mm,
if they weren't there, man, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting. It
right.
would be so boring to go camping. I don't know what you feel on that, but
Oh, definitely. That's the mystical piece. That's like, what is it about? The danger or the high risk in some of these wilderness settings, or just the awe and beauty of it, right? I think there's something there. I think it allows us to cultivate meaning in our life and have purpose. Knowing, I think, I mean, I'm thinking back to my research right now, but depression and things like that. By going into the woods and doing some of these wilderness expeditions, young kids or people who have maybe gone astray as far as like the law or something like that, going into some of these programs where they're going through wilderness expeditions and they're coming out, basically better than any type of like juvenile hall type thing or wherever they send young youth these days. But yeah, it's definitely some therapeutic medicine there, and I think there's something to do in that danger or risk or
absolutely, man. And
yeah,
that's exactly what Ammianus Marcellinus was saying back in 300 AD, right?
right, yeah.
With in his Roman time. So it's
Wow.
fascinating.
Well, you know what? That's. I'm glad you brought that up because I do. Well, we already touched on your whole project, but I mean, tell folks. I'm going to ask you the last question that I ask every guest here in just a minute, but tell folks a little bit more about where they can find your work before we get into that. Yeah, tell folks where they can find your work, or maybe more about this project or whatever you got coming down the pipeline.
Definitely, Sean. Yeah, I would say on Instagram, James Alofs is my handle. And then also TikTok, it's james.alofs. And yeah, some little girl from Myanmar, I think she's from like Myanmar. She's like 12 years old. She has my handle on TikTok. And I
Oh no.
tried messaging her. I'm like, what's going on, lady? Like she won't
Yeah.
respond to my messages. But anyways, that happens, right? But yeah, it's James Alofs on TikTok and Instagram. So that's the best place
You
to stay
couldn't.
connected.
You had to have the dot in there, eh?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just gave up my Twitter account. Yeah, you're speaking of other social media accounts, and I'm all ears because at this point I'm not so happy. I like Instagram, but I'm just not so happy with all things censorship right now. So I'm searching. So that said, I gave up the Twitter at Sean Slade, but you know what? I don't need it. It's okay.
Was that done for political reasons or?
No, I just I didn't like Twitter. I found it a very toxic environment. Like I don't know. I used to use it for research, sharing research, but then it started to become, as of late, this kind of armchair political thing for me, where you feel like you've got the ear of someone, but meanwhile you're just tweeting to the nothingness of it all, right? And with the 400, 500 people that I had on there, it's just I'm like, you know what? It's time to switch focus, and I've actually put it into something that allows me to communicate with researchers better. So I'm happy. I'm happy with the split.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
just lightening the load in the backpack. That's how I feel. It's just like a trip. You're thinking, do I really need this anymore? It's like, nope. Trying to keep the cybersecurity clean. But anyways, okay, well that's great, and yeah, I do wish you all the best there in LA on this project. Definitely keep me informed on what's going on, and love to get you back. But yeah, before I let you go, let me know, please, or tell us all what your wildest dream is for the Earth as you sit here today.
Wildest dream, I would say that we just get to a point where it's back to a symbiotic relationship where humans give as much as we take, because right now we're taking so much more than we give, on all fronts. And I think we definitely have the technology. It's not a money or a technology thing. It's more of a human, willpower. There is, ignorance and apathy and greed.
Mm,
So I think we're probably going to have to go through a big whack of extreme chaos due to climate change. as well as biodiversity loss. That's probably going to end up with human civilization getting shaken up quite mightily. But I think we're eventually going to get back to that stage. That's just my hope, man, to get back to a symbiotic relationship with Mother Earth.
Right on. I love that, and I love how you mentioned it comes down to the willpower. I think we sometimes get distracted, I think, in modern civilization, and as industrialization spans across the earth, no matter where it is. I find that, like you had said earlier, there's always that call to the wild, right? And I think we get distracted, and I think our willpower, if we were, sitting quiet in nature, we had access to nature, we're rewilding in whatever way we can, I think that we'll have enough clear headspace, and we'll make the right choice to choose, that symbiotic relationship with nature. So right on. I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Well, man, yeah, this has been a lot of fun. We're here at the hour mark right now, so I'll let you go. But yeah, thanks again for being here. I appreciate it.
No problem. And thank you, Sean, for all the amazing work you do, man. Keep rewilding and sharing your message, man. I love it. And we need your voice on the planet right now.
Thank you. So thank you. I'm doing my best to put it out there. And yeah, everybody, please, if you follow the show on Instagram, check out James. I'll link everything in the show notes so that we have that. And as always, stay wild. Thank you for listening to the Rewild My Bio podcast. Please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star rating if you have enjoyed this episode. I have so much gratitude for all of you who continue to share this show with your friends. It really does mean so much to me. If you want more content from Rewild My Bio, then please check out rewildmybio.com to find previous episodes and sign up for the newsletter. In the newsletter, I share blogs I have written and reflections from my current health promotion research. Please follow along on Instagram and Telegram with the handle @RewildMyBio and on Twitter @Sean Slade. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay wild.